The blood on the sheets told a story Rose Sullivan would never speak aloud. And as she limped down the stairs of her parents' farmhouse 3 days after her wedding, she knew she had to run before her husband returned from the cattle auction in Miles City. Her mother had warned her that the first night would hurt, but Mama had never mentioned the kind of pain that made you bite through your lip to keep from screaming, or the way a man could ignore tears streaming down a woman's face while he took what he believed was his by right. Richard Sullivan, her husband of 72 hours, had been drunk on their wedding night in the spring of 1878, and every night since. He was the son of her father's business partner, and their marriage had been arranged to seal a land deal that would make both families wealthy. Rose was 19 years old, and she had learned in 3 brutal nights that her life would be nothing but suffering if she stayed. She had packed a small bag with 2 dresses, her mother's silver locket, and what little money she had saved from selling eggs at the market. The bruises on her thighs made walking difficult, and the pain between her legs was still sharp enough to bring tears to her eyes with each step. But fear was a stronger motivator than pain, and Rose had heard Richard tell his father that he intended to get her with child as quickly as possible, to make sure she could never leave. The stage to Butte, Montana left at dawn, and Rose intended to be on it. Her aunt lived there, running a boarding house for miners and railroad workers, and had written many times inviting Rose to visit. It was the only place Rose could think to go, the only person who might take her in without asking too many questions or sending her back to her husband. The streets of Helena were still dark as Rose made her way to the stage office, her bag clutched tight against her chest. Every shadow made her jump. Every sound of hoofbeats made her think Richard had discovered her missing. But she made it to the office just as the attendant was lighting the lamps, and she bought her ticket with shaking hands. "You all right, miss?" the attendant asked, peering at her face in the lamplight. Rose realized she had forgotten to powder over the bruise on her cheekbone where Richard had struck her the night before when she had asked him to be gentler. "I am fine," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just eager to see my aunt." The stage was nearly empty when she boarded. Just her and an older woman with 2 children who looked to be traveling somewhere. Rose took a seat near the window and tried to make herself as small as possible, praying that no one would recognize her, that no one would stop the stage and drag her back to Helena and her husband. As the stage pulled away from the office and the horses began their steady rhythm toward Butte, Rose finally allowed herself to breathe. She touched the locket at her throat and thought of her mother, who had cried on Rose's wedding day but had not tried to stop it. Marriage was a woman's duty, Mama had said. A wife submitted to her husband in all things. That was the way of the world, but Rose did not want to live in a world where submission meant bleeding and crying and begging for mercy that never came. She would rather take her chances in Butte, even if it meant scandal, even if it meant her family disowned her. Anything was better than another night with Richard Sullivan. The journey to Butte took most of the day, and every mile felt like a small victory. The landscape changed from rolling hills to rougher terrain, and Rose watched it all through the window, trying not to think about what would happen when Richard discovered she was gone. He would be angry. He would come looking for her. But Butte was a big town, growing bigger every day with the mining boom, and Rose hoped she could disappear into it. Her aunt's boarding house was on a street called Mercury, and Rose found it easily enough after asking directions from a shopkeeper. It was a large wooden building, 3 stories tall, with a painted sign that read Callahan's Boarding House hanging above the door. Rose stood on the street for a long moment, gathering her courage before she climbed the steps and knocked. The woman who answered was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying red hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked so much like Rose's mother that Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. "Aunt Margaret," Rose said. Recognition dawned on Margaret Callahan's face, followed quickly by concern. "Rose." "Good Lord, child, what are you doing here?" She looked past Rose as if expecting to see someone else. "Where is your husband, please?" Rose said, her voice breaking. "Please, may I come in?" Margaret pulled her inside immediately, shutting the door firmly behind them. She led Rose to a small sitting room off the main hall and sat her down on a worn settee. "Tell me what happened," she said. The whole story came out in a rush, whispered words tumbling over each other. Rose tried to be vague about the details, but Margaret was a sharp woman who had lived a long life, and she understood enough. Her face grew hard as Rose spoke, and when Rose finished, Margaret took both of her hands. "You will stay here," Margaret said firmly. "I will not send you back to a man who treats you that way. I do not care what your father says. I do not care about any land deal. You are safe here." Rose began to cry in earnest then, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Margaret held her and let her cry, murmuring soothing words, and for the first time in 3 days, Rose felt like she might survive this. Margaret gave her a room on the 3rd floor, small but clean, with a window that looked out over the street. "Most of my boarders are miners," Margaret explained. "Good men, for the most part, but rough around the edges. You will take your meals in the kitchen with me, and I will expect you to help with the cooking and cleaning to earn your keep. Is that agreeable?" "Yes," Rose said. "Thank you, Aunt Margaret. I cannot tell you what this means to me." "You are family," Margaret said simply. "And no woman should have to endure what you have endured. Now you rest. I will bring you some supper, and tomorrow we will figure out what to do next." Rose slept for 14 hours straight, her body finally able to relax now that she was away from Richard. When she woke, the sun was streaming through the window, and she could hear the sounds of the boarding house coming alive below her. Men's voices, the clatter of dishes, the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up the stairs. She washed her face in the basin on the dresser and changed into her other dress, a simple blue cotton that was more suitable for work than the traveling dress she had worn on the stage. When she looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Her eyes were shadowed, her face too thin, and the bruise on her cheek had turned a sickly yellow-green. But she was here. She was away from Helena. That was something. Margaret put her to work immediately, teaching her the rhythms of the boarding house. They cooked breakfast for 20 men, served it in the large dining room, then cleaned up and started preparing for the midday meal. The work was hard and constant, but Rose found she did not mind. It kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, and Margaret was patient with her, never pushing her to talk about what had happened, but always there if Rose needed her. The boarders were indeed rough men, miners and laborers who worked long hours in dangerous conditions. But they were respectful to Rose, tipping their hats when they passed her in the hall, thanking her for the meals she helped prepare. Some of them were married men with families back east, saving money to bring their wives and children west. Others were young men seeking their fortune, full of dreams about striking it rich in the copper mines. It was 5 days after Rose arrived in Butte that she first met Austin Hawke. She was in the kitchen, peeling potatoes for the evening meal, when Margaret came in with a tall man behind her. Rose looked up and felt her breath catch. He was perhaps 25 years old, lean and sun-darkened, with light brown hair that fell to his collar and eyes the color of a clear summer sky. He wore the clothes of a working man, denim trousers and a worn cotton shirt, but there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of competence and quiet strength. "Rose, this is Austin Hawke," Margaret said. "He's taking the room on the 2nd floor. Austin, this is my niece, Rose." She is helping me run the boarding house." Austin removed his hat and gave Rose a small nod. "Madam," he said. His voice was low and pleasant, with a slight drawl that suggested he had come from further south. "Mr. Hawke," Rose said, then returned her attention to the potatoes, hoping he would not notice the tremor in her hands. "Austin works as a horse wrangler for the mining company," Margaret continued. "He will be taking his meals here as well." "I appreciate you having me, Mrs. Callahan," Austin said. "This comes highly recommended." Over the next few weeks, Rose saw Austin regularly at mealtimes and sometimes in passing in the hallways of the boarding house. He was quieter than the other boarders, keeping to himself mostly, but always polite when he spoke to her. Rose found herself noticing small things about him. The way he always helped clear the table after meals, even though the other men did not. The way he spoke gently to Margaret, treating her with a respect that reminded Rose of how her grandfather had treated her grandmother. The way his eyes never lingered on Rose in a way that made her uncomfortable, but instead looked away quickly, as if he did not want to intrude. She learned from Margaret that Austin had come from Texas, that he had a way with horses that bordered on magical, and that he was saving money to buy his own ranch someday. "He is a good man," Margaret said one evening as they washed dishes together. "Steady and reliable. The kind of man a woman could depend on." Rose said nothing, but she felt a flutter in her chest that might have been hope or might have been terror. She was a married woman, even if she had run from her husband. She had no business noticing any man, much less one as decent as Austin Hawke seemed to be, but she could not help noticing him. Could not help the way her heart beat a little faster when he came into the dining room for breakfast. Could not help stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking, studying the strong line of his jaw, the calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work, the way he moved with an easy grace that reminded her of the horses he worked with. It was 6 weeks after Rose had arrived in Butte that Richard finally found her. She was sweeping the front steps of the boarding house when a buggy pulled up, and Richard climbed down. He looked disheveled and angry, his face red with drink and fury. Rose's blood turned to ice. "There you are," Richard snarled, striding toward her. "Do you have any idea what you have put me through, woman? Your father is furious. Everyone in Helena knows you ran away. You have humiliated me." Rose backed up the steps, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the broom. "Stay away from me," she said. "You are my wife," Richard said, advancing on her. "You belong to me, and you are coming back to Helena right now." "I am not going anywhere with you," Rose said, trying to keep her voice steady even though she felt like she might faint with fear. Richard lunged at her, grabbing her arm hard enough to make her cry out. "You will do as I say," he growled, his breath reeking of whiskey. Rose struggled against him, trying to pull free, but he was much stronger than she was. "Let me go," she screamed. "I believe the lady told you to let her go." The voice was calm and low, but there was steel underneath it. Rose looked up and saw Austin standing in the doorway of the boarding house. He had come from inside so quietly that neither of them had heard him. He was not armed, but there was something in his posture and the set of his shoulders that made Richard release Rose's arm and take a step back. "This is between me and my wife," Richard said, puffing himself up. "It is none of your concern." "When a man lays rough hands on a woman on property where I live, it becomes my concern," Austin said. He came down the steps slowly, putting himself between Rose and Richard. "I think you should leave now." "Who the hell are you?" Richard demanded. "Just someone who does not appreciate bullies," Austin said. "Especially not bullies who hurt women. Now you can leave on your own, or I can help you leave. Your choice." Richard looked at Austin, taking in his height and the lean muscle visible through his shirt. Rose could see the calculation in her husband's eyes, weighing whether he could take Austin in a fight. Apparently, he decided he could not, because he backed toward his buggy. "This is not over," Richard said to Rose. "You are my wife by law, and I will have you back." "The law might say she is your wife," Austin said quietly. "But no law says she has to stay with a man who beats her. I have seen the bruises, Mr. Sullivan, and I am sure a judge would be interested to hear about them." Richard's face went white, then red again. "You have no proof of anything," he blustered. "Rose has the proof on her body," Austin said. "And I am willing to testify to what I have seen if it comes to that. So like I said, I think you should leave, and I do not think you should come back." Richard climbed into his buggy, but he pointed at Rose one last time. "This is not over," he repeated, then snapped the reins and drove away. Rose stood on the steps, shaking so hard she thought her legs might give out. Austin turned to her, his expression softening with concern. "Are you all right, Miss Rose?" he asked gently. She tried to answer, but a sob came out instead. And then Austin did something that surprised her. He held out his hand, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. "Let's get you inside," he said softly. Rose looked at his hand for a long moment. It was the first time a man had offered her a choice since her wedding day. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and steady, and he led her inside as carefully as if she were made of glass. Margaret had heard the commotion and came rushing out. "What happened?" she demanded. "Her husband came," Austin said. "He is gone now, but I think we need to talk about what to do next." They sat in Margaret's parlor, and Austin made Rose tea while Margaret fussed over her. Rose felt numb, the fear slowly draining away and leaving her hollow. "He will come back," Rose said finally. "He said it was not over." "Then we will deal with him when he does," Margaret said firmly. "You are not going back to him, Rose. I will not allow it." "Mrs. Callahan is right," Austin said. He was sitting across from Rose, his hat in his hands, turning it slowly. "But if you want my advice, you should see a lawyer. File for legal separation on grounds of cruelty. It will not be easy and it might take time, but it is possible." "I have no money for a lawyer," Rose said hopelessly. "I know a man who might help," Austin said. "He owes me a favor. Let me talk to him, see what can be done." Rose looked at him, this quiet cowboy who had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, who was now offering to help her fight a legal battle that was not his concern. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Austin met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze that made Rose's heart skip. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply, "and because no woman should have to live in fear the way you do." True to his word, Austin spoke to a lawyer named James Morrison, who agreed to take Rose's case. It would be a long process, Morrison warned. Montana law did allow for divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty, but Rose would need evidence and witnesses. The bruises had faded by now, but Margaret and Austin both agreed to testify about what they had seen. In the meantime, Rose continued working at the boarding house, trying to build some kind of life for herself. She was still afraid that Richard would return, but as the weeks passed with no sign of him, she began to relax slightly. Margaret had sent word back to Helena that if Richard came near Rose again, the law would be involved, and apparently that had been enough to keep him away for now. Rose found herself thinking about Austin more and more. He was unfailingly kind to her, but never in a way that felt invasive or demanding. When he spoke to her, he looked at her face, not at her body. When he passed her in the hallway, he gave her plenty of space, as if he understood that she needed room to breathe. And sometimes, in the evening after supper, he would sit in the parlor with her and Margaret, and he would tell stories about his life in Texas, about the horses he had worked with, about his dreams of owning land someday. Rose found herself looking forward to those evenings more than anything else. Austin's voice was soothing, and his stories painted pictures in her mind of wide, open spaces and freedom, things she had never really known. She began to understand that not all men were like Richard, that there were men in the world who were gentle and patient, who saw women as people rather than property. One evening in late summer, about 4 months after Rose had arrived in Butte, she and Austin were sitting on the front porch of the boarding house, enjoying the cool evening air. Margaret had gone to bed early with a headache, and the other boarders were either out or already in their rooms. It was just the two of them, watching the sun set over the mountains in the distance. "Can I ask you something?" Rose said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Of course," Austin said. "Why did you never marry? A man like you, I would think women would be lining up." Austin smiled slightly. "I came close once," he said, "back in Texas, but she wanted a life I could not give her. She wanted a big house in town, fine dresses, parties. I wanted land and horses and open sky. We both realized we wanted different things, so we parted ways before we made each other miserable." "Do you regret it?" Rose asked. Austin thought about that for a moment. "No," he said finally. "I think we both made the right choice. Better to be honest about what you want than to trap yourself in a life that makes you unhappy." He looked at her, his blue eyes serious. "I have seen what happens when people marry for the wrong reasons. It does not end well for anyone." Rose felt heat rise to her cheeks. "No," she agreed quietly. "It does not." They sat in silence for a while longer, and then Austin said, "Miss Rose, I hope you do not mind me saying this, but you are one of the strongest people I have ever met." Rose looked at him in surprise. "Strong? I ran away. I abandoned my vows." "You left a situation that was killing you," Austin said. "That takes more courage than most people have. You could have stayed and let him break you completely, but you chose to save yourself instead. That is strength." Tears sprang to Rose's eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Her mother had taught her that endurance was a woman's virtue, that suffering in silence was noble. But Austin was telling her that fighting for herself was worthy of respect. "Thank you," she whispered. Austin reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to move away, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was so soft, so careful, that Rose felt something inside her chest crack open. "You deserve kindness, Rose," he said softly. "You deserve to be treated with care and respect. I hope you know that." Rose could not speak, could only nod. Austin let his hand drop and stood up. "I should let you get some rest," he said. "Good night, Miss Rose." "Good night, Austin," she managed to say. After he had gone inside, Rose sat on the porch for a long time, touching her cheek where his thumb had brushed away her tear. She was falling in love with him. She knew it as surely as she knew her own name. And the realization terrified her, because she was still legally married to Richard, because she had sworn before God that she would be his wife until death parted them. Because loving Austin felt like both the most natural thing in the world and the most impossible. The summer turned to autumn, and Rose's lawyer continued working on her case. Richard had hired his own lawyer and was fighting the divorce, claiming that Rose was a disobedient wife who had abandoned her marital duties. The proceedings were ugly and public, and Rose had to endure having her most private pain discussed in a courtroom. But Austin and Margaret were there with her every step of the way, testifying on her behalf, supporting her when she felt like giving up. And through it all, Rose and Austin grew closer. They never spoke about the feelings developing between them, but Rose could see it in the way Austin looked at her, in the way he found excuses to be near her, in the small kindnesses he showed her every day. And she knew he could see it in her too, in the way she smiled when he entered a room, in the way her hand would brush against his when they worked side by side in the garden behind the boarding house, in the way she saved him the best pieces of pie at supper. It was Margaret who finally spoke the words aloud. One evening in October, when Austin had gone out to check on a horse that had gone lame, Margaret sat Rose down at the kitchen table. "You love him," Margaret said. It was not a question. Rose felt her face flush. "I should not," she said. "I am still married." "You are married to a man who brutalized you," Margaret said bluntly. "And you are fighting to end that marriage legally. There is no sin in your heart, Rose. You are not betraying anything sacred, because what you had with Richard Sullivan was never sacred to begin with." "But what if the judge does not grant the divorce?" Rose said, voicing her deepest fear. "What if I am trapped being Richard's wife forever? It would not be fair to Austin." "Austin is a grown man who can make his own choices," Margaret said, "and I think he has already made his choice, Rose. The question is, what choice will you make?" That night, Rose lay in her bed and thought about choices. She had not had many in her life. Her father had chosen her husband. Richard had chosen how their marriage would be. But now, for the first time, Rose had the power to choose something for herself. She could choose to push Austin away, to protect him from the scandal and complication of loving a married woman. Or she could choose to be honest about her feelings, to trust that they could find a way through this together. The next morning, Rose woke with a sense of purpose. She went about her usual chores, but all day she felt like she was waiting for something. When evening came and supper was finished, she found Austin in the stable behind the boarding house, checking on the lame horse. "How is she doing?" Rose asked from the doorway. Austin looked up and smiled. "Better," he said. "The swelling is going down. I think she will be all right." Rose stepped into the stable, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the autumn chill. "Austin, I need to talk to you about something." He must have heard the seriousness in her voice, because he straightened up immediately, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" Rose took a deep breath. "I know this is probably not proper, and I know my situation is complicated, but I need you to know that I have feelings for you. Deep feelings. And I understand if that is not something you want to hear, if it is too difficult given that I am still legally married to Richard, but I could not keep it to myself anymore. You have been so kind to me, so patient and good, and I just need you to know that you mean a great deal to me." She finished her speech and looked down at her hands, unable to meet his eyes, terrified of what she might see there. Rejection, perhaps, or worse, pity. But then Austin was there in front of her, his hands gently cupping her face, tilting it up so she had to look at him. And what she saw in his eyes was not pity or rejection. It was joy. "Rose," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I have been in love with you since the day I saw you standing up to your husband on those front steps. I have been waiting, trying to give you time and space, trying not to push you into anything before you were ready. But if you are telling me you feel the same way, then I am the happiest man in Montana." "You love me," Rose whispered. "With everything I have," Austin said. "And I will wait as long as it takes for you to be free. If that divorce takes months or years, I do not care. I will wait." Rose felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, they were tears of happiness. "I do not deserve you," she said. "That is where you are wrong," Austin said softly. "You deserve everything good in this world, Rose, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that to you, if you will let me." And then he kissed her, so gently that it was barely more than a brush of his lips against hers. But it was everything. It was a promise and a question and a beginning all at once. Rose melted into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I will never hurt you," he said. "I swear to you, Rose, I will never be like him. I will spend every day earning your trust." "I know," Rose said, and she realized it was true. She trusted Austin in a way she had never trusted anyone. She trusted him with her heart, with her future, with her very life. The divorce was finally granted in December of 1878. The judge ruled in Rose's favor, citing extreme cruelty and abuse. Richard was furious and tried to appeal, but his own father, disgusted by the details that had come out during the trial, refused to pay for further legal action. Rose Sullivan became Rose again, legally free for the first time in her adult life. Austin asked her to marry him that same day, right there on the steps of the courthouse, with Margaret crying happy tears beside them. "I know it is fast," he said, "and I know you might want time before you marry again. But Rose, I love you, and I want to spend my life with you. Will you be my wife?" Rose looked at this good, gentle man who had shown her what love was supposed to look like, and she knew there was only one answer she wanted to give. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Austin Hawke." They were married 2 weeks later in Margaret's parlor with a small gathering of friends from the boarding house. Rose wore a simple dress of ivory wool, and Austin wore his best suit, but the clothes did not matter. What mattered was the way they looked at each other as they spoke their vows, the way Austin's hand trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto Rose's finger, the way Rose's voice was strong and sure when she promised to love and honor him. The wedding night, Rose had been dreading it without even realizing she was dreading it. As she and Austin climbed the stairs to the room Austin had rented at a different boarding house for their wedding night, she felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. She told herself this was different, that Austin was different, but her body remembered pain and fear, and it reacted accordingly. Austin must have seen something in her face when they entered the room, because he stopped immediately. "Rose," he said gently, "we do not have to do anything tonight. Or any night until you are ready." Rose shook her head. "I want to be a proper wife to you," she said. I do not know if I can." Austin took her hands in his. "Listen to me," he said, his blue eyes serious and full of love. "Being a proper wife does not mean letting me hurt you. It does not mean forcing yourself to endure something that frightens you. I want to make love to you someday, yes, but only when you want it to, only when you are ready. And if that takes weeks or months or years, then that is fine with me." "But you have needs," Rose said, the words her mother had drilled into her coming automatically. "My need is to see you happy and safe," Austin said firmly. "Everything else can wait." He led her to the bed and sat down, pulling her down beside him. "Tell me about your wedding night with Richard." Rose flinched. "I would rather not." "I know," Austin said, "but I think maybe you need to. I think maybe you need to say it out loud, and I need to hear it so I can understand what you are afraid of." So Rose told him. Haltingly at first, then in a rush, she told him about the pain, about how Richard had not cared that she was crying, about how he had been rough and careless and drunk. She told him about the blood and the bruises, about how she had felt like she was being torn apart, about how every night after had been just as bad. Austin listened, his jaw tight, his eyes bright with unshed tears. When she finished, he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice thick. "I am so sorry that happened to you, and I promise you I will never treat you that way. When we make love, it will be about both of us. About pleasure, not pain. About connection, not conquest. And we will not do anything until you are ready." "How will I know when I am ready?" Rose asked, her face pressed against his chest. "You will know," Austin said. "And until then, we can just be together. We can talk and laugh and learn about each other. We can kiss if you want to kiss. We can hold each other. But nothing more until you tell me you want it." That night, they lay in bed together fully clothed, Austin holding Rose in his arms, stroking her hair and telling her stories about the horses he had worked with, about his plans for the ranch he wanted to build someday. Rose felt herself relaxing, felt the fear slowly drain away. This was her wedding night, but it was nothing like the first one. There was no pain, no force, no fear. There was only Austin's steady heartbeat under her ear, his gentle hands in her hair, his soft voice painting pictures of their future together. "Thank you," Rose whispered as she felt herself drifting towards sleep. "For what?" Austin asked. "For making this night about my comfort," Rose said. "For being kind." Austin kissed the top of her head. "I will always choose your comfort over my desire," he said. "That is what love means, Rose. That is what marriage should be." They spent the next several weeks learning each other in small increments. Austin was patient beyond anything Rose had imagined. He let her set the pace, let her initiate any physical contact. He seemed to take genuine joy in the smallest things, holding her hand as they walked down the street, stealing a kiss when they thought Margaret was not looking, sitting close to her on the settee in the evening. Rose found her fear slowly melting away, replaced by curiosity and then by desire. She began to notice things about Austin. The way his muscles moved under his shirt when he worked, the rough texture of his hands, the taste of coffee on his lips when he kissed her. She found herself wanting more, wanting to know what it would feel like to be with a man who was gentle, who cared about her pleasure. It was a month after their wedding when Rose finally felt ready. They were in their own small house now, a two-room cabin that Austin had been renting, and they were getting ready for bed. Austin was at the washstand, his shirt already off, and Rose found herself staring at the play of lamplight across his back. "Austin," she said softly. He turned to look at her, and she saw the question in his eyes. "I am ready," Rose said. "I want to be with you, really be with you." Austin crossed the room in 3 strides, but he did not grab her or rush her. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands and looked into her eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Because there is no hurry, Rose. We have all the time in the world." "I am sure," Rose said. "I trust you, Austin. I want this." What followed was a revelation. Austin undressed her slowly, carefully, kissing each new bit of exposed skin, murmuring how beautiful she was, how much he loved her. When he laid her down on the bed, he did not simply take what he wanted. Instead, he explored her body with his hands and mouth, learning what made her gasp with pleasure, what made her arch against him. He asked her questions. "Does this feel good? Is this all right? Do you want more?" And when they finally came together, it was nothing like Rose's first wedding night. There was no pain, just a feeling of fullness and connection. Austin moved slowly, watching her face, adjusting his rhythm to match her responses. And when Rose felt the first waves of pleasure beginning to build, Austin encouraged her, told her to let go, to take what she needed. When it was over, Rose was crying, but not from pain. She was crying from relief, from joy, from the understanding that this was what it was supposed to be like. This was what people meant when they spoke of marital intimacy, of two people becoming one. This was love. Austin held her afterwards, stroking her back, kissing her tears away. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I am more than all right," Rose said. "I am happy, truly happy. For the first time in my life, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "Me too," Austin said, holding her close. "Me too, Rose." The years that followed were good ones. Austin saved his money and bought a small ranch about 10 miles outside of Butte, near a stream with good water and grass. They built a life there together, raising horses and cattle, working side by side from dawn until dusk. It was hard work, but Rose had never been afraid of hard work, and she loved the freedom of it, the way they answered to no one but themselves. Margaret visited often, bringing news from town and baskets of food. She watched Rose and Austin together with satisfaction, pleased that her instincts about them had been correct. "You two were meant for each other," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I knew it from the start." Rose and Austin's first child was born in the spring of 1880, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel, and Austin cried when he held his son for the first time. "I am going to be the kind of father my father was," he told Rose. "I am going to teach him to be gentle, to respect women, to work hard and be honest. I am going to show him what a real man looks like." And he did. Samuel grew up watching his father treat his mother with love and respect, watching him work hard but never complain, watching him help their neighbors and stand up for what was right. 2 more children followed, a girl named Emma and another boy named Thomas, and Austin was the same devoted father to all of them. Rose sometimes thought about her life in Helena, about the woman she had been when she was married to Richard Sullivan. That Rose had been frightened and broken, convinced she deserved the pain she endured. But that Rose was gone now, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth, who had fought for her freedom and found love beyond anything she had imagined. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Rose back to Butte, to Margaret's boarding house. Margaret had retired by then, and the boarding house was run by someone else, but she still lived in town. They had dinner together, the 4 of them: Rose, Austin, Margaret, and Margaret's new husband, a retired miner named George who adored her. After dinner, Austin and Rose walked through the streets of Butte, hand in hand. The town had grown significantly in the decade since Rose had first arrived, the mining boom bringing prosperity and people. But some things were still the same: the mountains in the distance, the crisp Montana air, the sense of possibility that had drawn Rose here in the first place. "Do you ever regret it?" Austin asked as they walked. "Leaving Helena, everything that happened after?" Rose thought about the question seriously. She had lost her family when she left Richard. Her parents had disowned her for the scandal of the divorce, had never even met their grandchildren. That pain was still there, a dull ache that never quite went away. But when she weighed it against what she had gained, there was no question. "No," she said firmly. "I regret that I had to go through what I went through with Richard. I regret that my parents could not understand or forgive me. But I do not regret leaving, and I do not regret finding you. You gave me back my life, Austin. You showed me what love is supposed to look like. How could I ever regret that?" Austin pulled her close, kissing her right there on the street, not caring who saw them. "I love you, Rose Hawke," he said. "I will love you until the day I die and every day after, if there is anything beyond this life." "I love you too," Rose said. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for making our first night together about my comfort instead of your desire. Thank you for showing me that good men exist in this world." "Thank you for trusting me," Austin said. "Thank you for giving me the chance to love you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rose. You and our children, this life we have built together. I would not trade it for anything." They walked back to Margaret's house, where they were staying for the night, and Rose reflected on how far she had come. She had fled to but a broken, frightened girl. She had found refuge with her aunt, and then she had found Austin, the cowboy who had defended her, protected her, and loved her back to wholeness. Their life was not perfect. There were hard years when the cattle prices dropped, when drought threatened their livelihood, when illness swept through the valley and they lost neighbors and friends. But through it all, Rose and Austin had each other. They faced every challenge together, supporting each other, loving each other through the good times and the bad. As the years passed, their children grew, Samuel became a skilled horseman like his father, eventually starting his own horse breeding operation. Emma married a doctor from Helena, a good man who treated her with the respect and love she deserved and gave Rose and Austin their first grandchildren. Thomas went east to study law, determined to help women like his mother who were trapped in abusive marriages. Rose was proud of all her children, but she was especially proud that they had grown up seeing what a healthy, loving marriage looked like. They had never witnessed their father raise his voice to their mother in anger, had never seen violence or cruelty in their home. They had grown up believing that love meant partnership and respect, that marriage meant supporting each other through everything life threw at you. Austin kept every promise he had ever made to Rose. He never hurt her, never dismissed her opinions, never made her feel like she was less than his equal partner in their life together. When they disagreed, which happened occasionally because they were both strong-willed people, they talked it through until they found a compromise. When Rose was sick or tired, Austin took over her chores without complaint. When Austin was injured working with a difficult horse, Rose nursed him back to health with the same patience and care he had always shown her. They made love often throughout their marriage, and it was always about mutual pleasure and connection. Austin never stopped asking if something felt good, never stopped paying attention to what Rose needed, never treated her body as something that existed solely for his satisfaction. And Rose, who had once believed that physical intimacy was something to be endured rather than enjoyed, learned to take as much pleasure in their lovemaking as Austin did. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The house had been expanded over the years, now a sprawling structure with enough room for everyone when the whole family gathered. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and Rose looked around at all of it with wonder. "What are you thinking?" Austin asked, pulling her close for a dance. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Rose said. "How blessed. I could have died in that marriage to Richard, if not in body, then certainly in spirit. But I found the courage to leave, and I found you, and look at what we have built together." Austin smiled down at her, his blue eyes still as clear and loving as they had been the day they met, even though his hair was now more gray than brown. "We built it together," he said. "Every bit of it. You are the strongest person I know, Rose. You saved yourself and then you let me love you. That took more courage than most people have. You taught me what love was supposed to be," Rose said. "You showed me that I deserved kindness and respect. You made our first real night together about my comfort, about my healing, instead of about your needs. That changed everything for me, Austin. It showed me that I could trust you, that you were different from Richard in every way that mattered." "I would do it all again," Austin said. "Every second of patience, every moment of waiting. You were worth waiting for, Rose. You are worth everything." They danced together as the sun set over the Montana mountains, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, surrounded by the life they had built through hard work and love and unwavering commitment to each other. And Rose thought about that terrified 19-year-old girl who had fled Helena on a stage, running from pain and toward an uncertain future. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that she would find safety and love and happiness beyond her wildest dreams. But that girl was gone now, transformed into a woman who knew her own strength, who had built a good life with a good man, who had raised children who understood what love and respect looked like. And Rose was grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful ones, because they had all led her here to this moment, to Austin's arms, to this beautiful life they shared. As the years continued to pass, Rose and Austin settled into the comfortable rhythms of older age. They sold the cattle operation to Samuel and focused instead on the horses, which were less demanding. They spent their evenings on the porch, watching the sun set and talking about their day, about their grandchildren, about the life they had shared. Austin's health began to fail when he was in his early 60s. The years of hard physical labor had taken their toll on his body, and he developed a persistent cough that eventually turned out to be pneumonia. Rose nursed him through it, staying by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave him. "You do not have to stay," Austin said weakly one evening. "You should get some rest." "I am staying," Rose said firmly. "You stayed with me through my darkest days. You were patient and kind when I needed it most. I am not leaving you now." Austin smiled and took her hand. "I have had a good life, Rose, better than I ever dreamed. If this is my time, I am ready." "It is not your time," Rose said fiercely. "You are going to get better, and we are going to have many more years together. I refuse to accept anything else." And miraculously, Austin did get better. The pneumonia cleared, and while he was weaker than before, he recovered. The doctor said it was Rose's devoted care that had saved him, but Austin said it was Rose's sheer force of will. They had 5 more good years together. 5 years of watching their grandchildren grow, of seeing their children build their own successful lives, of sitting together on the porch and being grateful for every moment they had. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 31st, 32nd, 33rd, and 34th. It was during the winter after their 35th anniversary that Austin finally passed away, quietly in his sleep, with Rose holding his hand. He was 67 years old, and he had lived every day of his adult life with integrity and love. Rose grieved him deeply. The ranch felt empty without Austin's steady presence, without his gentle voice and quiet humor. But she was not alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love, and she could feel Austin's presence in everything around her, in the horses he had trained, in the house they had built together, in the memories that filled every corner of the ranch. She lived for another 15 years after Austin's death, spending her time with her family, teaching her grandchildren about the importance of respect and love in relationships, telling them stories about their grandfather and the kind of man he had been. She made sure they all knew how Austin had saved her, how he had shown her what real love looked like, how he had made their first night together about her comfort and healing rather than his own desires. Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by 3 generations of family. At her funeral, her children spoke about her courage, about how she had fled an abusive marriage at a time when such things were rarely done, about how she had built a new life through strength and determination. They spoke about the love she had shared with Austin, about how their marriage had been a model for all of them of what partnership should look like. Samuel stood at her grave and said, "My mother taught me that real strength is not about enduring pain, but about having the courage to walk away from situations that hurt you. She taught me that love is patient and kind, that it is about respect and partnership. And my father showed me how to be a man who honors women, who treats them as equals, who understands that their comfort and happiness matters as much as his own. Together, they showed me what marriage should be, and I have tried to live up to their example every day of my life." Emma, wiping away tears, added, "My mother survived something that would have broken many people. She not only survived, but she thrived. She built a beautiful life with my father, and she raised us to understand that we all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. She showed me that women can be strong and soft at the same time, that we can demand respect while still being loving and kind. She was an inspiration to me every day of her life." Thomas, the lawyer who had dedicated his career to helping women escape abusive marriages, said, "My mother's story has been my motivation in my work. because of what she went through, because of the courage she showed in leaving Richard Sullivan and fighting for her freedom. I have made it my life's work to help other women do the same. She showed me that the law can be a tool for justice, that we can use it to protect the vulnerable and punish those who abuse their power. Every woman I have helped has been a tribute to my mother and the path she forged. They buried Rose next to Austin on a hillside overlooking their ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Rose Hawke, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She knew her worth and fought for her happiness." 1859–1941. Next to it, Austin's stone read, "Austin Hawke, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He showed the world what real love looks like." 1853–1919. And there they rested together. Two souls who had found each other in the rough and tumble world of the Montana frontier, who had built a life of love and respect and partnership, who had shown everyone around them what marriage could be when it was based on mutual care and consideration rather than on ownership and control. Their legacy lived on through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, through the lessons they had taught about courage and love and respect, through the example they had set of what it meant to truly partner with someone through all of life's joys and sorrows. They had started with Rose's desperate flight from pain and Austin's steady hand, offered in protection and kindness. And they had built from those raw materials a love story that would be remembered and retold for generations. The ranch remained in the family for decades, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together with love and respect. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew down from the mountains and the sun set over the Montana plains, some said you could still feel the presence of Rose and Austin, still together, still watching over the land and the family they had created, still showing the world that real love endures beyond death, that kindness matters, and that a wedding night should always be about comfort and care rather than pain and domination. It was a love story that had started in darkness and fear, but had blossomed into light and joy. It was a story about courage and healing, about patience and respect, about two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, and had spent the rest of their lives proving that love, real love, was worth fighting for. And it was a story that would never be forgotten by those who knew them, because Rose and Austin Hawke had lived their lives in such a way that everyone who encountered them was left a little better, a little kinder, a little more understanding of what it meant to truly love another person with your whole heart.